We're the Open the Book team from St Peter's Church. Some of you may remember us coming into school to share Bible stories with you during assembly. We really missed doing that, so we decided to record one for you especially. Did you manage to visit the Easter garden in front of the church during the holidays? If you did, maybe you recognise the picture we've used to illustrate this story, which tells us something about what happened straight after the very first Easter. We hope you enjoy it. Do any of you keep a diary? I do. I like to write down all the things that have happened during the day, what I've done and who I saw. Sometimes it's fun to look at an old diary and read about what I was doing 5 or even 10 years ago. A diary is also a good place to record special memories so that I don't forget them. Most diaries are quite personal things, and only I and maybe 1 or 2 special people would get to read it. In today's story, we meet a man who many years before also wrote a diary, a special diary that is read by thousands of people every day as part of the Bible. Let's open the book and read John's story.
John was getting old. His hair was grey, and in the evenings he found it hard to see what he had written. But he was determined to finish his book about Jesus. He spent long hours gathering all his memories together. He was pleased with the way it had turned out, and now it was nearly finished. The final part was all about the last week John had spent with Jesus, and it was important that he wrote down exactly what had happened, so that in years to come, anyone who read his book would know that these things really happened. Demetrius, one of his brightest students, brought John his evening drink.
Have you nearly finished?
Almost. Would you like to see?
Demetrius picked up the parchment from John's desk and began to read.
Near the cross, the women watched and waited. During these last 3 years, they had fed him and cared for him, and now they stood, huddled together, frightened and upset. What were they to do? What would happen after Jesus was dead? Jesus looked down and saw his mother standing there. He searched the faces in the crowd, and then, as if he had read their minds, he called out to her.
Dear woman, here is your son.
Mary didn't understand what he was saying. And then she looked up and saw John, Jesus' dear friend, standing nearby. As she looked at him, she heard Jesus say to John,
Here is your mother.
John moved over to Mary and put his arm around her shoulder, as together they watched and waited. A little while later, Jesus called out,
It is finished.
Then he bowed his head and died. One by one, John, Mary, and the women left. Jesus' body was taken down from the cross and placed in an empty tomb in a nearby garden.
2 days later, John was sitting quietly with his friend Peter when the women came running up.
The tomb is empty,
Panted Mary Magdalene.
They've taken him away and we don't know where they've put him.
Peter and John leapt to their feet, looked at each other, and then ran as fast as they could to the tomb. John got there first. He always did. John peered nervously into the tomb. It was gloomy inside, but he could see enough to tell that Jesus' body had gone. Just as he was trying to work out what had happened, Peter arrived, puffing and panting. He pushed past John, stumbled into the tomb, and then stopped and stared. John crept in behind him. They looked around. They blinked as their eyes got used to the gloom. All that was left was a pile of burial linen and a single white cloth folded up on one side by itself. John looked and smiled.
I wonder,
He thought to himself.
That evening, one by one, Jesus' friends arrived at the meeting room. Once they were all safely inside, they locked the doors, frightened that the soldiers would arrest them too. The news of the empty tomb had travelled fast. What did it mean? What had happened to Jesus? Mary Magdalene was convinced that she had seen Jesus. She claimed that he was alive and that she had actually spoken to him. No one knew what to believe. Then suddenly, without any warning, Jesus was there, standing among them, smiling and reaching out his hands.
peace be with you.
He said. The room fell silent. They stared in amazement. Was it really true? Were their eyes playing tricks? Was this really Jesus standing right in front of them? They looked at one another. First one smiled, then another. Then they burst out laughing and cheering and jumping up and down. They were overjoyed when they saw the Lord.
Is that how it really happened?
Oh, yes, it really was.
And Mary, Jesus' mother, stayed with you after that?
Oh, yes, yes. And I remember the smell of Mary's cooking and the taste of her matzah bread.
Mm. And the tomb really was empty?
Oh, yes, indeed.
And you really did see him in the meeting room?
Oh, so many questions. Yes, yes, yes. All these things really did happen, just as I've written.
What an amazing story.
And John smiled, happy that the amazing story of Jesus and his friends would be read for many years to come.
John wrote down all the things that happened when he was with Jesus. It's one of the most important books in the Bible. He wanted to share his memories with people like you and me.
Close your eyes for a moment and think about something important that has happened to you, something that you want to share with your friends.
Now I'm going to say a prayer, and if you want to make it your prayer, say Amen at the end. Dear God, thank you that John wrote down all the things that he could remember about his time with Jesus. Thank you that we can still read them today. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Well, that's our story. Thank you for listening so well. And we hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.